Something extraordinary just happened, and I'm not talking about the bombs falling on Tehran. I'm not talking about the ships burning in the Persian Gulf. I'm not talking about oil at $100 a barrel or the Strait of Hormuz essentially shutting down. I'm talking about something bigger, something that almost never happens in modern geopolitics. The United States of America, the most powerful military machine on this planet, just went to war, and almost nobody showed up with them. Let that sink in for 1 second. Not Saudi Arabia, not the UAE, not Qatar, not Spain, not France, not the United Kingdom, not offensively anyway. All of these countries, longtime partners of Washington, some with decades of defense agreements, some with American bases on their soil, all said some version of the same two words: count us out. What you are watching right now in real time is not just a war with Iran. It is the fracture of America's global alliance structure in a way that we have not seen in a generation, maybe longer. And what is incredible is that Washington's response has not been diplomacy. It has been threats. Raw, naked, publicly broadcasted threats against allies. That is the story. That is what this breakdown is about. And by the time we are done, you will understand not just what happened this week, but why it matters for every country, every economy, and every person who fills up a gas tank or buys groceries. Stay with me, because this gets significantly more explosive before it gets clearer. If you are not yet subscribed to Daily Brief, hit that button right now. This story is moving fast, and you are going to want to be here for every update. Let's go back. Not years, not decades, just a couple of weeks to February 28th, 2026. That is the day United States and Israeli forces launched what the White House called Operation Epic Fury, a series of coordinated strikes on Iran, including its capital, Tehran, targeting ballistic missile infrastructure, naval capacity, proxy networks, and nuclear-adjacent sites. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in those opening strikes. That moment, that is where this began. And here is the thing the mainstream coverage keeps missing. Before those strikes were launched, Washington did not consult its allies in the Gulf, did not call Riyadh, did not brief Abu Dhabi, did not sit down with Doha. The United States and Israel went ahead, and the Gulf states, the countries that live next door to this war, the countries whose cities would immediately face retaliation, whose airspace would be contested, whose oil infrastructure would be targeted, found out the same way the rest of the world did: on the news. So when Iran's missiles and drones started hitting Saudi Arabia, hitting the UAE, hitting Bahrain, real strikes on Gulf infrastructure, including the Sheba oil field, one of Saudi Arabia's most critical revenue assets, and Bahrain's Bapco oil refinery, which declared force majeure, these countries were not just being asked to join a war. They were already being punished for a war they never agreed to fight. And Washington's response to this? Threats. That is the stage. Now let's get into it properly. Announcement number 1. Senator Lindsey Graham went on national television and delivered what amounts to the most extraordinary display of alliance mismanagement we have seen in decades. On the evening of March 10th, 2026, Graham appeared on Fox News alongside host Sean Hannity and spent the better part of an hour threatening every major American partner in the region and in Europe, either publicly or by direct implication: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Spain, France, the United Kingdom. In one television appearance, let's be precise about what he said, because the exact words matter. On Spain: to our friends in Spain, man, you have lost your way. I don't want to do business with you anymore. I want our air bases out of Spain into a country that will let us use them. On Saudi Arabia: our embassy was hit in Riyadh. Do you not have an obligation to join the fight with us? You have yet to do that. So if you do not believe the American embassy being attacked in Riyadh would trigger mutual self-defense, maybe we shouldn't do a treaty with you. On the UAE, which had announced at the United Nations that it would not participate in offensive operations. You said today publicly at the UN your country would not be used to join the fight against the Ayatollahs. On the Gulf broadly: to our Arab friends, I've tried to help you construct a new Middle East. You need to up your game here. I can't go to South Carolina and say we're fighting and you won't publicly fight. And then, this is where it becomes genuinely remarkable, Graham said on live television, God bless Israel. We should move all our stuff to Israel. I'm with Israel. I will be with Israel to my dying day. Stop there. A sitting United States senator publicly threatening to pull American bases out of Spain, a NATO ally, threatening to revoke defense agreements with Saudi Arabia, demanding that sovereign nations send their sons and daughters into a war they were never consulted about, and closing with a declaration of unconditional personal allegiance to a foreign country, in one breath, on live television. Now here is where this becomes even more extraordinary. As reported by the Jerusalem Post and the Wall Street Journal, Graham was not just a television commentator on this war. According to Graham himself, he made multiple trips to Israel before the strikes, meeting with Mossad intelligence officials and Prime Minister Netanyahu. He told the Wall Street Journal, "They'll tell me things our own government won't tell me." He said he coached Netanyahu on how to make the case to Trump to authorize the strikes. Netanyahu then presented Trump with intelligence that Graham says convinced the president to proceed. So we have a sitting senator who helped architect the political conditions for this war, who is now on cable television threatening allies who won't fight it, while simultaneously offering foreign nations mutual defense treaties, a presidential authority, from a television studio couch. The reaction came fast, and not just from Democrats. Republican Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, Graham's own state, posted publicly, "No boots on the ground. If Senator Graham wants to go fight in a foreign conflict, let him be the first to volunteer." She added that she had spoken with the administration multiple times and that nothing had changed regarding ground troops. Meghan McCain, daughter of the late Senator John McCain and a conservative commentator, wrote on X, "I am imploring anyone who will listen in the Trump administration to stop sending this man out as a surrogate. He is scaring people and doing damage to whatever message you're trying to sell to the American public about the Iran war." Former Fox News host Megyn Kelly asked bluntly, "When did Lindsey Graham become our president?" She noted that in a single 24-hour period, Graham had issued direct warnings to Lebanon, Cuba, Saudi Arabia, the wider Arab world, and Spain. Right-wing commentator Matt Walsh wrote, "Where does he think he derives the authority to unilaterally offer permanent defense agreements to foreign countries? Who exactly made this effeminate weirdo emperor of the world?" When your own ideological coalition is asking those questions in public, you have a messaging problem that goes beyond optics. Received. Announcement number 1, received. Announcement number 2, the Gulf states are not just declining, they are actively blocking Washington's military objectives, and they are saying so publicly on the record at the United Nations and through major business figures who carry significant weight in regional politics. As confirmed to Middle East Eye by a U.S. official, Saudi Arabia has blocked American access to its bases for offensive operations. Not rumor. A U.S. official confirmation. Riyadh allows defensive postures. Nothing offensive, period. Iran's foreign minister Araghchi stated publicly that Saudi officials were fully committed to not allowing their territory, water, or airspace to be used against Iran. Let that settle. Iran's foreign minister publicly confirming what Saudi Arabia had pledged to Iran, not to Washington. The UAE's announcement at the UN that it would not join offensive operations was followed by the Saudi Foreign Ministry issuing a statement saying, "The kingdom affirms that it retains its full right to take all necessary measures to safeguard its security, sovereignty, and the safety of its citizens and residents." Note what that says. It does not say, "and therefore we stand with our American partners." It says, "We will protect ourselves unilaterally as we see fit." Now, here is where you need to pay close attention. An Emirati billionaire named Khalif Ahmad Al Habtoor, one of the most influential businessmen in the UAE, a country that includes both Abu Dhabi and Dubai, published a public statement responding directly to Graham's remarks. This is not a fringe voice. This is a figure with deep connections to UAE leadership and business circles. And what he wrote tells you everything you need to understand about why the Gulf is sitting this war out. Al Habtoor wrote that the Gulf states know exactly why they are under attack. He wrote that they also know who dragged the entire region into this dangerous escalation without consulting those he calls his allies in the region. He called the American decision-making hasty and said the war was imposed on us as a result of conflicts between powers vying for influence in this region. He was direct about the framing. In this scene, Iran, Israel, and the United States all move according to their own interests, not according to the interest of the people of the Middle Eastern Arab countries. He said the Gulf states value the lives of our sons, and we do not treat their souls as collateral damage as some do. And then he went to the economic argument, quoting Graham's own words back at him. Graham had said on Fox News that Venezuela and Iran together hold 31% of global oil reserves, and that if Iran's regime changes, the United States would make a lot of money. Al Habtoor wrote, Only then does the picture become clearer, and only then do we understand why they want this war. He ended by saying, "You may be a senator in the U.S. Senate, but anyone who hears your statements might think you're a member of the Israeli Knesset because you defend Israel's interests more than you defend the interests of the American people themselves." That statement, published by a major Gulf business figure directed at a U.S. senator, is a document of historical significance. It is not a tweet. It is not a hot take. It is a careful, detailed argument for why the Arab world will not follow America into this war, and it deserves to be understood on its own terms. Received. Announcement number 2, received. Pause here for a second. If this analysis is adding something to your understanding of what is actually happening, hit the like button. It helps Daily Brief reach more people who are trying to cut through the noise. Drop a comment telling us what you think is the most important piece of this story that is being underreported. We read all of them. Announcement number 3. This is the one that nobody is connecting correctly, and it is the one that, if you follow its implications, changes the strategic picture fundamentally. Russia is providing intelligence to Iran, actively, right now, against American forces. As reported by NBC News, based on 4 sources with direct knowledge, Russia has been sharing intelligence with Iran on the location and movements of American military assets in the Gulf region. That reporting was subsequently confirmed by additional Western officials. UK Defense Secretary John Healey told reporters publicly, "I think no one will be surprised to believe that Putin's hidden hand is behind some of the Iranian tactics and potentially some of their capabilities as well." Iran has fired more than 2,000 Shahed drones across the Middle East since the war began on February 28th. As reported by CNN, Russia has been helping Iran specifically with drone tactics developed and refined through Russia's use of those same drone designs against Ukraine. The expertise that was built up in years of drone warfare over Kyiv and Kharkiv is now being deployed in the Persian Gulf against American assets. Ukrainian President Zelensky, who has been offering Ukrainian drone counter-expertise to American forces, stated publicly that Russia was helping Iran not just with unmanned aerial vehicles, but also with missiles and air defenses. Think about that dynamic for one moment. Ukraine is helping the United States counter Iranian drones. Russia is helping Iran deploy them. This is a proxy confrontation playing out inside a larger war, and Washington appears to be only partially aware of the depth of it. Here is what makes it extraordinary. When Trump was asked directly on March 13th in a Fox News radio interview with Brian Kilmeade whether Putin was helping Iran, Trump said, "I think he might be helping them a little bit. Yeah, I guess. And he probably thinks we're helping Ukraine, right?" That is the president of the United States describing confirmed intelligence that an adversary is helping target his own troops as a reasonable symmetrical exchange. They do it, and we do it, in all fairness. And then, on the same day this story was developing, the White House began discussing lifting sanctions on Russian oil. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Fox Business, "We may unsanction further Russian oil." Let's trace this sequence plainly. Russia provides intelligence to Iran used to target American forces. Oil prices spike because of the resulting war and Strait of Hormuz closure. Russia's oil revenues increase because of those higher prices. Russia's discount on crude shrinks as Asian buyers scramble for supply. Washington considers lifting Russian oil sanctions to bring prices down, which would further enrich Moscow. And throughout this, Trump describes Putin as someone who wants to be helpful. As European Council President Antonio Costa stated publicly, so far, there is only one winner in this war, Russia. It gains new resources to finance its war against Ukraine as energy prices rise. It profits from the diversion of military capabilities. Russia's ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kellen, told CNBC, "We still are trying to understand what are the goals of President Trump in this campaign. You know that lots of doubts have been expressed about the exit strategy that the American administration can have in this endeavor." That is Russia's ambassador politely asking the question that every allied capital is asking privately. What is the plan? When does this end? What does victory look like? There is no clear answer coming from Washington. Received. Announcement number 3, received. Now let's make this concrete. Let's talk about what this means for the global economy and for regular people, because that is where geopolitics either becomes real or stays abstract. The Strait of Hormuz is not a concept. It is a narrow stretch of water, roughly 21 miles wide at its narrowest point between Iran and Oman. On a normal day, roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through it, 20% of global supply, all at once, through one choke point. As reported by the International Energy Agency in its most recent monthly report published this week, the war has created what the IEA called the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. The agency has now coordinated the release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves across 32 member countries. The United States added 172 million barrels from its own strategic petroleum reserve. Experts told CNBC this covers only a fraction of normal Hormuz flow. As reported by Euronews, Brent crude briefly surged to approximately $120 per barrel earlier in the conflict before falling back toward $100 after Trump suggested the war might end quickly. Those statements did not hold. As of this week, Brent is trading just above $100 per barrel, up sharply from around $60 in mid-February before the war began. West Texas Intermediate, the American benchmark, was trading just under $90. Iran's IRGC has been explicit about its strategy. Spokesperson Ibrahim Zolfakhari of Iran's military command told state media, "Get ready for oil to be $200 a barrel because the oil price depends on regional security, which you have destabilized." According to Reuters reporting confirmed across multiple outlets, that threat is not purely rhetorical. The IRGC announced that any vessel linked to the United States, Israel, or their allies attempting straight transit would be considered a legitimate target. Shipping traffic has ground to a near halt. As reported by Al Jazeera, at least 5 tankers have been damaged, 2 crew members killed, and approximately 150 ships are stranded around the strait. As reported by Time magazine, the cascade effects extend far beyond oil. Urea prices, the most widely used nitrogen fertilizer, have risen 35% since February 28th. Roughly a third of the world's urea transits through the Strait of Hormuz. Gulf states produce nearly 49% of global urea exports and 30% of global ammonia exports, according to analysis by American Farm Bureau economists. If ships cannot bring fertilizer to market, farmers may use less of it, reducing crop yields and increasing food costs. That is not a prediction. That is already beginning. Around 8% of the world's aluminum is produced in the Persian Gulf due to the region's energy abundance. Aluminum smelters in Qatar and Bahrain have paused shipments. Aluminum prices are at their highest in nearly 4 years. That directly affects the cost of vehicles, aircraft, construction, and consumer electronics. Helium, a byproduct of natural gas processing critical for semiconductor manufacturing and medical imaging, is at risk of supply disruption. When semiconductor supply is disrupted, the cost of iPhones, laptops, and defense electronics rises. As reported by CNBC, the national average price for regular gasoline in the United States stands at $3.57 per gallon as of midweek. Analysts project that could exceed $5 if the blockade persists. That is not a Wall Street abstraction. That is every commute, every grocery run, every heating bill. And here is the thing that the White House has now essentially acknowledged: there is no economic policy fix for this. As CNBC reported from a senior administration official who spoke on condition of anonymity, we expect these prices to come down significantly once the war is complete. The only path to lower energy prices is ending the conflict or reopening the strait by military force. Everything else is delay. The administration can release reserves, waive sanctions, talk to allies, but until the strait is open, the market does not believe the problem is solved. This is a problem Trump cannot negotiate his way out of. The tariff playbook does not apply here. The sanctions leverage does not apply here. This is a military problem with a military solution at a cost that nobody has clearly articulated to the American public. Now let's look at the full chessboard. Every actor, every interest, every calculation. What does Iran want from all of this? Iran is not trying to win a military confrontation with the combined force of the United States and Israel. That is not the play. What Iran is doing is making the war too expensive to continue. Every day the strait stays closed, the global economy pays. Every day oil stays high, the domestic political cost to Trump grows. Every ally that declines to join the coalition is a data point that Washington is increasingly isolated. Iran's strategy is not to survive the bombs. It is to make the bombs politically unsustainable. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the Ayatollah killed in the opening strikes, said in his first public statement since being appointed that the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed as a tool to pressure the enemy and that all U.S. military bases in the Middle East should be closed immediately, warning they would be targeted. As reported by NBC News, Oil prices traded sharply higher immediately following that statement. What does Russia want? We covered this, but let's be direct. Russia wants high oil prices, sustained Western distraction from Ukraine, potential sanctions relief, and the erosion of American alliance credibility. It is getting all four simultaneously. European Council President Costa said it plainly. Russia is the war's first winner. What does China want? This is subtle but important. China imports approximately 70% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. In the short term, the Hormuz closure hurts China economically. But in the medium term, China benefits from deepened Gulf state dependence on Beijing as an alternative to Washington for security guarantees. As reported by Kapler, China will likely deepen reliance on Russian crude as Gulf supplies are disrupted, further entrenching the Russia-China energy relationship. And critically, Trump said publicly at a press conference this week, "We're really helping China here. China gets a lot of their energy from the Straits. It's my honor to do it." The President of the United States describing a blockade of the world's most important oil choke point as a favor he is doing for China in the middle of an active war at a press conference. Stop and process that. What does Israel want? Israel launched this campaign alongside the United States and has been the most aggressive targeting actor. Netanyahu's goal has been consistent for years: the permanent elimination of Iran's ability to threaten Israel, including its nuclear program, its missile arsenal, and its network of regional proxies. Those are long-term objectives. Whether 2 weeks of airstrikes have achieved them, or whether they require sustained military operations that will continue to reshape the region, is the central unanswered question. What does Saudi Arabia want? Riyadh wants to survive the transition from a unipolar American-led security order to whatever comes next. The kingdom condemned Iranian strikes on its territory. Its Sheba oil field was hit. Its refinery infrastructure was targeted. Iran's foreign minister publicly confirmed Saudi Arabia had pledged to not allow its territory used against Iran. Saudi Arabia is threading a needle of extraordinary difficulty, and it is doing so not because it likes Iran, but because it does not trust that Washington has its long-term interests in mind. The $142 billion defense deal finalized with the United States last year, including F-35 access, hangs in the balance of every gram threat. And Riyadh knows that. Now, the two paths. I see them clearly. I want to be honest that the timeline on each is genuinely uncertain. Path 1. Iran concludes its leverage has peaked. The military damage is serious. The new supreme leader, only just appointed, needs to demonstrate he can protect the regime without presiding over its complete destruction. France, China, and Russia, all of whom have reached out about ceasefire conditions per Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Garibabadi speaking on state television, broker a framework. The United States accepts a deal that allows it to claim victory on nuclear objectives while Iran retains governmental continuity. The strait reopens. Oil falls to $70 or below within weeks. Trump declares it the greatest foreign policy victory since Reagan. The alliance fractures get papered over. The structural questions go unasked. Condition required. Iran's leadership must calculate that accepting negotiations now, while still able to negotiate from a position of demonstrated capability, is better than continuing until Washington achieves forced regime change. That calculation requires rational actors under extreme pressure. It is possible. The diplomatic channels are active. Path 2. The strait stays closed through March and into April. Oil breaches $120 again and sustains there. Global recession probability climbs sharply. OPEC's spare capacity, concentrated in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, cannot reach markets because those countries cannot physically move oil through a closed strait, and their pipeline alternatives, as analyzed by Kapler, cannot fully offset the closure. Russia's war machine is funded through rising petrodollars. Ukraine war support from Washington quietly deprioritized. Iran's regime consolidates around defiance. The domestic economic pain in America becomes the defining political story of 2026, and the alliance architecture, not just strained but fundamentally reordered, never fully returns to its pre-war configuration. I think path 2 is the more likely path for the next 2 to 3 weeks. I hope to be wrong. The structural damage to America's alliance credibility, Spain potentially reconsidering its NATO relationship, Gulf states accelerating their China pivot, European leaders building diplomatic off-ramps that bypass Washington, does not reverse when the shooting stops. as noted in reporting by multiple outlets on the economic consequences once manufacturing supply chains restructure around new energy realities, and once countries form new strategic partnerships born of a crisis in which Washington failed to consult them. Those relationships do not simply snap back. What I want to leave you with is something that has not been said clearly enough in any single piece of coverage I have read this week. These are not comfortable questions, but they are the right ones. Here's what I am asking you to weigh in on in the comments. Is Lindsey Graham acting as Trump's authorized spokesman on this war, in which case his threats against Saudi Arabia, Spain, and the UAE represent official U.S. policy? Or has he become a rogue actor whose cable news appearances are actively making Washington's diplomatic position worse? Because those two possibilities have very different implications for where this conflict goes. Do you believe Saudi Arabia and the UAE are making a permanent strategic pivot away from the American security umbrella? Or is this a temporary positioning play that will resolve once the war ends, with both sides quietly acknowledging they need each other? And this is the one I keep returning to: when the dust settles, whichever path gets us there, which country comes out of this period structurally stronger? Because by the metrics visible today, the answer is not obvious, and it might not be the answer Washington is assuming. Leave your answer in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the full picture. If Daily Brief is giving you analysis you are not finding elsewhere, we are not going anywhere. This story is still developing in real time. Stay with us.